Good afternoon. My name is Tom Lupinacci, parishioner here at Saints Peter and Paul since 2005, and one of the many pleasant tasks I have is to conduct the church tours. Now, our church is a beautiful building, and it's virtually a prayer. It helps you, as you come to Mass, to focus on one or two of the features, to calm your mind, and such that you can fully participate in the celebration of the Mass. The parish has had 3 churches in its history. The first was a wooden affair across the street. It's built in 1846. The first stone church was built on this site and consecrated in 1866 and served the parish until that church was destroyed by an arsonist's fire on Pentecost Sunday, June 4th, in 1922. Cardinal Mundelein, working with Father Schutte, who was the pastor at the time, felt that a cathedral-like church should be built, foreseeing the growth of the western suburbs, and that they will possibly someday be spun off into a separate diocese, and possibly Saints Peter and Paul could be the seat of that diocese. Well, half of that came true. The diocese, as you know, is located in Joliet, but we have this wonderful church to serve us today. We're introducing this in the series on the church in the ongoing series of Did You Know? Where we will be talking about specific windows in church and features of the church. But let me give you a couple of teasers today. Now, it's a Gothic revival church, and it's a cruciform style with a central nave crossed by a transept and hence forming a cross. Now, the real star of the church are the windows. There are 16 windows, 7 in the apse, 2 in the transept, 6 in the nave, and 1 in the choir loft. Now, one interesting thing that's so very, very subtle, and there's so many subtle things about this church that you tend to miss them possibly, is that they're the complementary nature of the windows. The ones across from each other are related. For example, in the transept, you have the Ascension and the Assumption. Obviously, the relation there. Going into the nave, you have the Annunciation and the Resurrection, which is the beginning and the end of Christ's life on earth as a man. Going back, you have the Nativity and Christ speaking to the little children. The lesson there is that our faith should be as simple as that of a little child. The third window are Christ teaching, finding of Jesus in the temple, Christ teaching to the doctors of the church. And opposed to that is Christ healing the sick and the lame in front of the temple. The lesson there is Christ teaches us and heals us in body, mind, and spirit. The central window in the apse, which is the crucifixion, and in the choir loft, Christ seated on the throne in heaven. In the crucifixion, over Christ's head is the sign INRI, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, placed there as a contradictory and an insulting fashion by Pilate. But when you turn to leave, for the first time you see Christ seated on the throne of heaven as the King of the Jews, with that same INRI as his feet as a footstool. Therefore, obviously proclaiming he is Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. Now let's talk about a couple of the windows specifically. Before I do that, all of the 15 windows, 7 in the apse, 2 in the transept, and 6 in the nave, were designed and built by the Trirolene Glass Company in Innsbruck, Austria. The one in the choir loft was designed and built by F.X. Zettler in Munich, Germany. Now that one, there's a mystery. There's always a mystery in a church, right? It was installed in 1953, and we don't know what the delay is from 1927 when the church was consecrated. Best guess is it was held up because of World War II. And in the lower left-hand corner, there is, and you can't see it necessarily, but is Chicago 41, and it's signed by an H. Mensch. Now, that's generally the sign of a repair that has been made. And so that would be 1941, rightly, certainly in the middle of the war in Europe. So it stands to reason that it may have been delayed or held up, impounded either in Europe or in the United States until the war was over. But anyway, that's one of the mysteries that will never be solved. But specifically, I'd like to talk about a couple of the windows. I talked earlier about how subtle many of the things in the windows are that you might just overlook them and say, oh, that's the Annunciation, and go right on by it. But there's several windows that are really, really very interesting. The first is in no particular order, we'll go through the one just to the right of the crucifixion, and that's the institution of the Eucharist. This is the point at which Christ is giving us his most precious gift, himself, his body and blood. Over his right, to the right of Christ on his shoulder is Judas. And it's almost, you can't see him. He's clothed in black, turning back, looking at Christ and the other apostles with a sinister, evil look on his face. So think of this in terms of contemplation. At the moment Christ is giving us his most precious gift, he's being betrayed, and Judas is turning his back on him and walking out. Sin. The second we'll talk about is the center window, which is the crucifixion. One of the interesting, there's 3 or 4 stories, but we'll do those on the tour when you come on the tour. But one of the most interesting things that most people ask about is Mary's hands, as you'll notice when you come to church again, are folded in prayer, but they're pointed down. Now, when one prays, hands are pointed up. And I talked to several priests about this, and we've looked and looked and looked and walked through different angles, and we finally realized her hands are not pointed at the foot of the cross, which is where the grave is, if you look at the picture, because Christ is beyond the grave. They're really pointed at the tabernacle. So the lesson here, all things point to Christ. Now, another probably one of the more intriguing windows, if you can say that about, because they're all intriguing, is the second one on the left-hand side of the altar, Abraham and the sacrifice by Melchizedek. There's 3 figures in the picture. Melchizedek, who is the Prince of Salem, future site of Jerusalem, certainly Prince of Peace, and being almost a Christ-like figure himself. The second is kneeling down is Abraham and his nephew Lot standing over him. Now the story here, Lot is captured by an enemy, he's rescued by Abraham, and Abraham goes to Melchizedek asking for a sacrifice, thanking God for saving his nephew. And the interesting thing, though, this is the only time in the Old Testament that a sacrifice has not been that of an animal of some sort. But Melchizedek's hands, if you notice it, there's a table, which represents an altar, a linen cloth, another linen cloth, which is the corporal, where the gifts are placed to be consecrated, a plate of bread, and a chalice of wine. And Melchizedek's hands are over the gifts, similar to where the priest's hands are during the epiclesis of the Mass, just prior to the consecration. The bell rings once, and the priest says, is really calling down the power of the Holy Spirit to make the gifts holy and acceptable to God. But the key is, this was written in the book of Genesis, thousands of years before Christ. So I use this as an example. If any time says, did the Holy Spirit really write the Bible? How could anyone know but the Holy Spirit about Christ? Because no one at that time did. Very intriguing window. Now, there's more to talk about, but certainly we'd like to invite you to come on tours later on. And certainly we definitely invite you to weekly watch for a Did You Know series, where various features of the church will be highlighted in talks and so forth, to learn more about it and to tease you more to hopefully coming on a tour. And we'll be with you soon. Now, the next tours that are scheduled right now will be during the Homecoming Fest, August 27th. And there'll be 2 in the afternoon. There'll be 2 of them held in the afternoon, and we'll schedule others through the year. And also, if you want a private tour, certainly those can be arranged as well, and we'll tell you how to do that. So once again, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. And when next time you come to church, take a look at these windows and really see what's really is there, because they are indeed a prayer. Thank you very much.